Silva. I am an artist, a multidisciplinary artist with a very strong bent for abstraction. And then I basically study different subjects and themes and come up with different bodies of work. So Afrocentric architecture generally, then Afrocentric architecture is one of those bodies of work. So that's why I'm here today.
Okay, my name is Nmadili Okumabwa. I'm an urban planner, an educator, the founder of CPDI Africa, which is the Community Planning and Design Initiative Africa. Our mission is to fast track the evolution of African-centered architecture from the continent all the way through the diaspora. And we do that with a lot of events, workshops, excursions, competitions here in Nigeria and in the US.
Okay, thank you. So let me start with the second half of the question. I actually, from the time I was a kid, I've always been fascinated by design, including built spaces. And I guess, it's something that is just within me. It's just natural to me. But this particular body of work I was looking to connect deeper. I had finished an exhibition on environmental sustainability last year at the Turkish Embassy, and I am planning for one on social sustainability. And I was asking myself, what could connect these two exhibitions? And I realized that built spaces have the component of the environment and then the component of the human beings that live in them. So I felt that was something I could do in between while I was waiting for the final words for upcoming exhibition. So that's how it all started and got me more and more interested in built spaces, began to research, and then began to bring context into where I have lived and where I've functioned all my life, so yeah, thank you.
All right, those who hold the vision of what our communities could look like, back from the past all the way to the present, now into the future, it's always been the creatives, the artists. They are the first ones to give our spaces identity. Artists working as architects as well take things to another level. But how do we truly guide the way our cities are designed, how they grow, how they evolve? That becomes the role of the policymakers. So artists working with architects, working with policymakers to shape the way we're going, how we evolve, becomes very important. So how do we navigate that conversation? How do we combine all three? That is what we're trying to work on today. And the work that we're seeing that Imal Silva is doing, I think, in my opinion, really brings those three together. Yes.
Well, thanks to CPDI, where I went to take a course on Afrocentric architecture. Like I said, I initially started from a macro perspective, from a more global, universal perspective. But then again, if you're looking at a subject, you must personalize it and you must find out how it affects you as a person and your immediate community. So going for that course in the preparation for this exhibition made me realize the place of culture, the place of spirituality, the place of materials, the place of community, the place of aesthetics in architecture. So these are all elements, and that we need to consider when we're designing a space. These things are considered in contemporary times, but they were also considered in previous times. But have we lost out on the body of knowledge that people earlier in these climes had? And are we just doing something that everybody is doing everywhere right now? In the process, are we losing out on something? So basically Afrocentric architecture would have to be about designing for Africa by Africa. And again, I will also add something, because we live in the tropics and we live in a particular belt globally. I believe that there are so many important truths that are embedded here that can have universal value and implications. So it's not just for Africans alone, this body of knowledge. It can also be made available to those outside Africa.
Okay. Again, the importance of working with the artists, right? So I'm a planner. And most people know CPD Africa as a work of architects. But when CPDI was launching back in 2014, we actually took the concept, the idea to the art community to have them, first of all, create that aesthetic. Because, you know, the aesthetics is very important. It's the first thing you see when you see something. So if the artist could get that aesthetic language perfect, then the architects could now take that and make architecture from it. And so we eventually moved on with the architects. However, now that we have these prototypes that have come in from those who studied architecture in school, we want to now take these languages now back to the art community for them to give us their take on that language or these languages. Because these Afrocentric designs is not really African architecture. The designs are actually coming from each ethnic group. So what's House architecture, what's Shekiri architecture, what's Yoruba, Igbo, all right? So we take these design philosophies, come up with these modern prototypes by architects, and then now let's see what the artists would do. Take creative license to express these forms in more aesthetic languages. So what we're seeing in the exhibition now is exactly that. It's an artist's take on the built environment and coming from that African lens, that Afrocentric lens. Those that are purely abstract, all the ones of those that are influenced by the master builder himself, Dimas Wonko, seeing an artist's take on an artist's take as well, because Dimas is also an artist. He's a master builder, architect, artist, creative. So seeing Imal's take on Dimas Wonko's architecture was truly incredible, and the depth, his introspective take on those design philosophies, like he talked about, what we talk about at CPD Africa: culture, aesthetics, spirituality, materials, and of course the engagement of the community.
Okay, so interesting. So I would use Papa Demas Nwoko as a reference again. I don't think I'll be this influenced to look at indigenous forms of architecture if I was not privileged to have lived in Ibadan and have spent time inside his buildings. I used to go there. I had an interest in design, I had an interest in art, but I had a physical contact with these structures. These are finished structures. They're not, it's not that somebody had an idea and they just put some sticks and stones together. No. Entire amphitheaters built with brick made from earth. So I would sit there and I would ask myself, there's value here. Why is it that people are not looking at these things, from a deeper perspective? So it's important for us to go back to where work had been done. That's why I keep emphasizing this continuity. I know when we were doing the workshop, you were telling us how you were having competitions on Yoruba architecture now, not just Afrocentric. Tiv, different tribes, to be able to extract knowledge from these different people within the country itself. So first and foremost is to have preferences and roots, and we need to put one leg in history. And doing that, I grew up in Yoruba land, so I've been influenced by the Yoruba culture more than any other culture. So if I was to design something, there will always be, if I was to design something that way, there will always be that bent. It's the way I see, because that's how I was conditioned. So the future would mean to go back to the past, look at where we are, and then plan for the future, which means that even if it means for us to train AI or train technology to help us design based on the way we see. AI is not seeing, it's only telling you how everybody is seeing, it's just trying to do its best. It's not a human being, so it's limited. But there's a conditioning we have had. That's why I brought the component of spirituality. How do you explain the emotions you get when you go back to your home? You can't tell me that something that elicits those emotions don't have a spiritual quality. So AI doesn't have that spiritual quality. It can never have spiritual quality. So there's a component, that is where the artist, as an artist I'm speaking, that we need to be very, very intentional going forward. We have technology it is a fantastic advantage. Because we have technology, we have access to data, we have access to tools, but then we must always go back and ask ourselves, how do we make it ours? And then if we are able to do this, then we can talk with those in power, those in governance, and say, okay, this is what has been done, this is where we're coming from, this is where we are, this is where we want to get to. And we believe that, most importantly, and these are my closing words, you bring unique selling points. The fact that it is, why is Nigerian music, for example, what it is globally? If they were singing what somebody else was singing, it wouldn't be so popular. Because you're giving the people outside a whole new perspective to music, or the Nigerian bent to music. That's what makes it unique. So the uniqueness in it is actually being able to go into what is local and then make it global. So policymakers need to understand that we take what is local, we make it globally acceptable, standardized, whatever, you will be able to answer to that better. And then commercially too, why would somebody come and look for a resort in Africa or in Nigeria that is Africa? Why would the Oingo people come? Why would foreigners come? Because they want to experience Africa. So African architecture is also an experience. And that's how we need to see it.
Good one. Okay, so standing on existing protocol, everything you just said. So I would take it, a step further and say all these things should be mandated. I would go hardcore. The policymakers have to take these initiatives seriously, because it would actually help them. I think our policymakers, our leaders, if they really do want better, stronger nations, then they will do things, or they'll put things into policy that really do help the people, the community. When it comes to art, architecture, and policy making, like I said, the artists visualize, the architects can manifest, but the policymakers have to make sure that these recommendations coming from the built environment professionals actually get done, they're taken seriously. So the two examples I will give, I like to give them the folks in Ethiopia. Ethiopia says that they're the one nation that was never colonized, so they're kind of forward-thinking. Definitely, they're forward-thinking. A lot of the Ethiopian architects and students were interfacing with CPDI when we started out in 2014, and I found out that their government had mandated that for heritage preservation to thrive, any architect who is submitting plans to their development control for approval for building permits, if that design did not reflect any of their identity, whether it's the materials, sustainable materials, whether it's the aesthetics, whether it's the cultural or spiritual elements, if they could not find any of those elements in that design, no building approval for you. Yeah. So they were intentional about it. So of course you go to Ethiopia and you see architecture that's actually still speaking their language. The other example I want to give is coming out of Morocco, sorry. And the site supervisors are always the local master builder, the people who have not gone to school. They're the traditional builders. The trained architects answer to them. So when you come to site with your modern, ultra-American, ultra-British design, is not going to get built. They also want to tell you, we don't see the heritage preservation here, which is why when you go to Morocco, you can tell driving around the built environment that those buildings are modern Moroccan or modern African. The colors, the materials, the courtyards, the spirituality, the aesthetics, it is their own, right? So you are mixing the local cultural master builder knowledge with those who've gone through the Western education, right? But that's policy. So the policymakers, they play a very important role in us shaping our continent. They say Africa is rising. Okay, fine. Africa has to be rebuilt, not built, because she was built before. Africa needs to be rebuilt. In whose image will we build her? It should be in our own. It cannot be in a fake version of the West.
Interesting question. We have an urban planner here. She's most qualified to answer this, but I will speak from the perspective of an artist. The first thing it is not is an AI version that you get off a phone. Nothing against AI, it's fantastic. But if you say the future, it's much more than that. Why do I say that? It's not even just about the aesthetics, just copying and pasting. Every country, every people, every culture is different, right? All over the world. There's a way an Igbo person looks at something and interprets it. There's a way a Yoruba person will look at the same thing and interpret it. That's why a Yoruba song that is a global hit is different from one song by an Igbo musician. That's why a fashion design done by somebody in the East is different from one done by somebody in the North. There's a difference in seeing. The way you look, the way you see things is different. And that is the first thing I want to see. So having said that, if we don't, that is where the artist comes in. Because if you're connected to the culture of where you live or where you lived, there's a way you subconsciously understand how we see things, how we perceive things. So these are the deeper understanding. So even if you say you want to design a city for the future, it can't just be, let AI design something for us. No. We need to see city where. Is it in Igbo land? Is it in Tiv land? Is it in Kano? Where? And if that's the case, how are we going to see it from the eyes of the people that live in that place, who have seen they have seen their culture in a particular way, they've seen their materials in a particular way, they've seen their community in a different way, they've looked at their spirituality in a different way. So at the end of the day, that city you want to design should be a continuum. It cannot be that it's not something you plunk from outside. It's not something you just come and drop. It's a continuum, it's a continuity. And the heart of this is the spirituality. Yes, the aesthetics shows it, the materiality, yes, but it's much deeper. That's what I want to say. Designing a city there's urban morphology. By the time we start going deeper into that, you will be able to break it down for us. So I would say that it takes much more. I'm defining more of what it is not than what it is. It is not just cut and paste. It's not just asking AI to design the future of African cities, because the AI itself was designed by different people from all over the world, so it was fed with information of their own perspective of Africa. So how do you expect it to interpret what it is supposed to be totally for the Africans? So let me not go beyond that. Thank you.
All right, lovely answer. So I'll build upon that, but I'll take us all the way back to the past. I always talk about Kemet. We know it as Egypt. City planning that was done by those ancestors 10,000 years ago. What were they thinking of to design the Egypt that we know today? What was a grand empire, grand nation, grand world superpower back in its time? What is the relationship between people, their leaders, community members, how people operate in their different spaces, their relationship between life and the afterlife? You can imagine why pharaohs would have pyramids, those structures built in that way, something that we still don't understand what they were thinking today. But the philosophy of the people was embedded in their urban planning, it was embedded in their architecture. It gave them their identity. It truly was. They say that the highest form of a society's evolution is the sign of the advancement of their architecture or the urban planning. All right. So if people were to come to the cities of Africa today or African diaspora cities today, what would they see? What would our communities tell them about us? Would they think that we were highly evolved based on what they are seeing? Or would they think that we are struggling or poor or primitive, right? So the advancement of our cultures should be reflected. I always say that the pyramids were not supposed to be the highest of Africa's evolution or civilization. That was just the beginning, 10,000 years ago. What should our cities look like today? We should have advanced much further with amazing science and technology and urban planning practices. So yes, we should be able to drive through the spaces of Zululand or Ashantiland and just look out the window and be marveled by what those cultures have produced, right? How they've laid out their cities. Are the temples, the shrines, the palaces, the markets, are they in the center of town and people live around, radiate in circles? Or are the people in the middle and the military on the outside and on and on? What is our relationship with the afterlife? You might think that is strange. Some people feel that it's important to have cemeteries where we bury our dead. Some people believe that our ancestors should be buried in the house with us. That's often an African ideology. So how do you design for cities and for homes, for neighborhoods, where the living and the dead are living together? It's not the past, it's current. Where I come from, we bury in the house. My parents are laid to rest in our house. So that's a design philosophy that would be reflected in our urban planning practices and in our architecture. All of those things give the way we plan a deeper sense and of meaning. And even just like how back in the past, every man inherited land in his village or his town, the chief will allocate land to members of it. So you weren't having to pay for land. It was something that was yours by right because you were part of the community. So you can see, if we are giving out land, how do you plan a town, a city, a village, or how do you do urban planning for an area that is growing if the policy is that everybody is entitled to free land? You can imagine the whole talk about affordable housing and all these issues will go away because we all have land. Then the next thing will be the policies about how do we build. Do I have to pay to have my house built? Or could that be community engagement, sweat equity, how Africa used to be built? When it's a young man's turn to building home, he calls family and friends, and we all help him to build. When it's the next person's turn, we do the same. To say thank you is a big party, feast, food, and drink. That's, if you think about that concept in contemporary planning, our cities will look and feel different because we would have true ownership. I actually know my neighbors because they all help me to build my house. Nobody will go around feeling like I don't know you, I can rob, steal, harm you in the name of money, because we actually all designed and built our community together. So it's a very, very different outlook on planning, but bringing that Afrocentric perspective, again, culture by culture. How the Luo in Kenya do it is different from how the Zulu or the Nmadili do it, or those in Idoma land do it, or those in Jamaica. But what are those philosophies? Bring them into the built environment, and we would create spaces that, just like people go to Egypt today and they are in awe, they will roam through Africa in awe of what we are designing, planning, building, and maintaining.
Thank you so much. So, I had started the body of work before I was invited to Turkey. I wasn't invited to Turkey particularly for that. I was invited to Turkey to exhibit with other Nigerian artists and also to conduct a workshop in Turkey. But since I had done these works, I said, okay, let me take them and let me put it out in Turkey and let me see how people react to it. So the 3 works I had done, I took them with me, and then I noticed that, we used to have a massive crowd coming every day to watch us work, the Nigerian contingent. And I don't notice this body of smaller group of people, like 5-6 people that will come often and be looking at the work. So I asked them, who are you? Tell me more about yourselves. They said they were architects and architecture students. So I now realized that, okay, these forms were beginning to resonate with some people. And maybe as much as a lot of people appreciated what all of us brought there, this particular group may be the ones I'm supposed to really link with, So I started talking with them, and then they said, well, they're architects too. Conversation started, and then they said, yeah, sometimes they get so busy, they know that they're also artists, like you said, but they forget that they're artists, and they become so technical in their output. And that could they watch my studio process in Nigeria? I said, fine. This is the first time that I've had people watching the process and not just the exhibition. So I said, fine. And then in the course of discussion, they said, can I also suggest some topics for them to discuss from an artist perspective? Just like you said about looking at design through the eyes of an artist, because I feel an artist is a bridge between culture and the architects who are the connection to the engineering side of things. So, and I designed some topics, and we had some sessions online as well. So that helped me look at it from a more macro, universal perspective. But something happened. One of them said, oh, he actually had to study African architecture. I think he was one of the lead architects there, said he had to study African architecture to be able to build for Africa. And I was like, we have Nigerian architects here. They're coming from Turkey to study African architecture to build for Africa. How much more us who are here? We should be able to study our architecture and be able to tap into that design wisdom. So, but then when I came and I started continuing with the work, and I realized that I got to know about the work CPDI was doing. I felt I need to go deeper. I'm not an architect. It will not be the best for me to assume that I know exactly, all that I need to know. Let me go and learn. So I sat under Nmadili and her team, and of course, they now broke it down to these indigenous forms of architecture. And like she said, it's not just Afrocentric architecture. She's talking about, they spoke about Igbo, Yoruba, within Nigeria itself, unbundle this thing. And then I now put myself in my journey I've been in Nigeria for 44 years, and I ask myself, where have I lived, and how have these spaces influenced me now at a micro level? And that is how the body of work continues. So I had a number of works I did before, and a number of works I did after CPDI. And if you look closely, you see the difference, because the ones after are more personal and they have to do with my journey and the lessons of design through the journey. While in the other one, there are more macro concepts, issues, general issues and subjects to handle regarding design, also along the same topic, but not so contextualized. I hope that helps.
Yes, I think we've come a long way in Nigeria. The whole movement of cultural design, let me say Nigerian-centric architecture, was actually started back in the 40s, I'd say, 50s, by Dimas Wonko. He was the first pioneer that kind of pushed forward this ideology that we should be designing with our own cultures in mind, region, climate, aesthetics, spirituality. All of these things he incorporated in the masterpieces that he built in Ibadan, in Benin City, in Delta State. And being an artist and an architect, he really set the trend. He was way ahead of his time. Today, we are happy that that conversation is no longer just kept to him and a few people who are connoisseurs of African architecture. Now it is a conversation that we are having throughout the country in schools of architecture, in schools of design, art. And a lot of this has happened as a result of CPD Africa pushing that narrative that we should be conscious of who we are and why our ancestors designed and built the way they did, what was the value, how that helped us build our communities, and how that information can be incorporated today to solve a lot of the problems that we are facing. Affordable housing, the fact that our housing is not very easy to be maintained. Why? The buildings are hot. Why? Because of the materials that we are using now that were put upon us during the colonial era, right? So now we're trying to find solutions to problems that we started facing during the colonial era. And we're realizing that the answers are in the past. There was a reason why we used earth, clay, some people call it mud. There was a reason why we used those materials. It kept us cool. Africa is very hot. The sun cannot penetrate those thick earth walls. So there was science and technology and wisdom in the materials that they used. So now we want to know how do we come back to using that material, but in a more modern way, so that the contemporary Nigerian will appreciate those materials. The fact that using earth is available, so that makes it affordable. Talk about affordable housing. If you're busy importing so many materials from around the world, then you shouldn't be surprised if it's very hard to afford housing or to afford architecture. The fact that representing our aesthetics in the architecture has a lot of value. When people see the designs that come out of our competitions, out of our studio, they say, oh, they are so beautiful. And that's one thing that we are known for on the continent is our aesthetics, and our fashion, the way we dress, and just the flair, the vibe, the swag, as some people will say in the African American community. But how those buildings look, their beauty. So seeing the value when you juxtapose something made in glass, steel, and concrete against something designed with Yoruba pride or Igbo swag or Hausa finesse, you can't compare. And so that pride is coming back to the table now. So I think that these kinds of conversations and the fact that you're having a lot of Afrocentric architects winning international awards is letting us know in Nigeria that it's okay. That it's okay to support and be a part of a movement that preserves your own culture and identity in your built environment. So yes, things are changing now, and it's a very popular word. Afrocentric architecture that's the thing now. So we're really excited about that.
So I think the first thing I would like them to consider is that they live within spaces, and these spaces, these walls hear and see things. So much has happened within these walls that only the walls have heard and seen. So if one day we leave that house and somebody brings that house down to rubble, I feel that a lot of memories also gets wiped away with that. That's how I see it. I may be wrong. What do I mean by that? These spaces hold much, they have much more value. I mean, let me put it this way. For example, you grew up in a particular place, schooled, left that city, went abroad. During the end of the year, you plan to come back to your hometown. When you're coming back to your hometown, something begins to happen to you emotionally. Why do you look forward to coming back home? Why do you look forward to coming back to that house once again? Let's even assume after some time that once parents have gone, they've left us. Even then, why do you hold such memories of that space? So why is it that even after parents are gone, that the family will still want to maintain that house and look after it if they can? Because it holds memories. So why did I say that? It's much more than somewhere we just lay our head or where we work. The same thing with your school. Why are you still in touch with your alumni? Why is it that when you guys have a reunion and you go to school, go back to school, a whole flood of emotions come into your mind and memories together? By the time you sandwich the two and you're in the middle, something happens to you, have a whole gush of hormones coming afresh that makes you healthier. Why? That's what I'm saying. So there's something about these spaces that are more than just commercial ventures. That is where the problem is. So everybody just building. Let's make money. I'm not against people building. All I'm just saying is that there's much more to this. So if you're not going to design this, like Nmadili said, if 10,000 years ago they did this, if we had continued with this and not just gone the way we did, maybe these spaces would have much more value. Why would you not go and pull down the pyramids? Can you try it? Even if you're the president of Egypt, can you try it? You can't. Why? You can't say the president you want to bring it down to rubble. It's not possible. The international community will rise up. Because it's not just for Egypt. Because of its value is, the value has spread way beyond Egypt. How much more the spaces we live in? So, that is why it's important to understand, like she said, the philosophy behind our building and the spirituality. When I say spirituality, I want us to approach it with wisdom. I'm not talking about, I'm not trying to scare people, but I want to let you know that you can't have that level of emotion fixed to a space, and don't tell me that there's no spiritual component to that. Why is it that you go to a mosque and suddenly you calm down, or you go to a church and your body slows down, and all the thing you are doing outside, you'll be gentle? Why? So these are questions. So the design, Afrocentric design, or whatever design it is, has to be a bit more intentional, not a bit more, a lot more intentional. And not only that, the preservation of these spaces. How do we look after them? How do we continue to grow them? And how do we plan to preserve the continuity is what matters. That's why I said when you talked about urban spaces and urban cities, the city in the future is a continuum of what started 10,000 years ago. It's not something AI is going to design and give you now. That it's not it. So where we need to retrace our steps. And if Nigerian music has gone global, Nigerian fashion has gone global, Nigerian films have gone global, the visual arts have gone global, food has gone global, Nigerian architecture should also go global. Thank you.
It's important because if we don't value who we are, we can't appreciate anything. We will not take pride in anything. Nothing is sacred. Like you said, can you imagine somebody trying to pull down the pyramids? It's impossible, right? Some people have said if they were not so heavy, maybe Europe would have come and carried them. But you can't move the pyramids. So it's important to have value, to have respect for yourself. You can only do that if you appreciate who you were made as. For those who believe in God, God did not make a mistake when He made your people. So there's nothing to be ashamed about. But how do you value that? Especially for those of us in Africa who have been, colonized for so long, from the whole era of slavery to now, people being told that who they are is savage or primitive, what they've done has no value. All of that should be erased, pulled down, and be replaced by somebody else's definition of humanity. So for us now, we really do have to have that awakening to remember who we were, remember who we are, so that we can move forward with pride into the future. Find solutions that solve our problems. It's very, very important. Afrocentric architecture would not have any value if it wasn't solving problems. Yes, why do we value our music, fashion, our art? Why do we? We have pride in it. Luckily for us, those are not things that we had to go to school for to learn how to appreciate. But when it comes to architecture, it has to be very intentional. So what we're doing at CPDI Africa is pushing that our curriculums be changed, that they be made Afrocentric as opposed to Eurocentric. Go to school and learn what your forefathers did when it came to designing their towns and building their buildings. Learn what they created, learn what they invented. What was the science and technology? Of course, the aesthetics as well. Take that information and improve upon it. If students can go to school and learn about who they are from kindergarten, grade school, university, PhD, you can imagine that we'll be graduating people who are experts in knowing who they are so that they can create something that works for them. Again, I will use Dimas Wonko's philosophy of natural synthesis. Blend contemporary with traditional and create something that is comfortable, that is beautiful, that is affordable for you, that is sacred for you. But you're not going to know that if you're going to school and you're forever looking in a different direction. You're learning about somebody else's culture, what works for them in their built environment, what works for them in their economy, and then you wonder why we have the jackpot syndrome. Everybody wants to run and go there because you're not learning about your own place and how to make your place, how to build your place as beautiful, right? So what we're doing is we're pushing those curriculums until Afrocentric architecture and planning. And I have to give a shout out to Professor David Hughes, whose word we are using, Afrocentric architecture, from his publication in 1994. Until schools are teaching our children from an African lens, then CPDI has that parallel academic platform. If you're not getting it in your classroom, It's a space you can go and learn about design and architecture and planning from your own culture's perspective. Come up with amazing masterpieces, but learn about it. One day when it's incorporated into our main school curriculums, then all of us will be learning, and it's not just architecture, it's also learning Afrocentric politics, economics, everything, medicine, including the architecture. So we are pushing for curriculum reform. We've made some progress, but that is basically what we're doing now. And then the second thing we're doing is actually building those samples, those prototypes. Our students have graduated and moved on to design and build some amazing works. And they're joining the leagues of Afrocentric designers around the world. But it starts with education. It starts with education.
Yeah, in closing, I would just say that I hope the exhibition is also an experience, that it will help us to stop, think, before we move forward again. I wish to thank Windsor for the opportunity, for the exhibition, and I also remember getting everybody to write the little answers to the questions. You know, when you're there, you can go through and see the response from the different people that have come and what they say about living spaces and built environments. For me, it's about taking things personal, making your living spaces and built environments part and parcel of your personal life, and seeing how you can also be an advocate to push the same narrative. Thank you.
Okay. My closing would be for any young creative who's listening or has the opportunity to visit Windsor to experience Imal's exhibition. I would say dig deep, reflect, do some research on who you are. Who are your people? What's your culture? Go to the village, talk to your grandparents. If you are blessed and lucky and there are buildings that still reflect your heritage, quickly photograph them, ask questions, come back, sketch, draw, imagine what those spaces could look like. The Wakanda effect, right? If you had been given the opportunity to continue to evolve and grow in your own identity, if you'd never been conquered, what would your town or your city or your village look like today? Be the master, be the artist that creates that identity. Make a name for yourself by creating a language that is unique to you and your culture. If you are Idoma, become a master Idoma architect. Specialize in it, be proud. Whatever culture you come from, be proud of that. And I think that's my takeaway. Be proud and confident in who you are. Figure out yourself, project to the future, and that's it.